Hey there guys. I've been keeping this down for a long time now. It has been almost 10 years since this happened, and I think it's now time I start to tell my story. This might get pretty long because all the events that I'm about to narrate have long occurred, so that means that unlike most of the stories I normally read on this Reddit, there won't be updates. My ex-wife betrayed me and I lost my marbles. Some time ago, I was married to a lady named Caroline. She was a career-driven lady and one of those strong independent women who only cared about her career. She wasn't always like that. I don't know, something about the job she got after we got married made her like that. We got married young, she was 24 and I was 27. We decided to hold off on having kids because we wanted to spend a few years enjoying each other's company. I had suggested it and she agreed because she thought we weren't yet mature enough to handle raising kids. We decided to wait until we were married 5 years. She got that job 2 years into our marriage. I remember her first day at work. She came back so happy and full of immense admiration for her coworkers. She couldn't stop telling me everything she had learned from the first day at the office. What did she tell? Well, let's start from the fact that it was a female-dominated workspace, which I didn't really care much about until she said they wanted to make it a female-only thing, but they needed the men to run the things they couldn't. Things that were heavy-duty. I thought that was weird, seeing her joke about how her coworkers spent most of their lunch break shitting men. I get women empowerment and all, but that seemed to me like taking it too far. Due to that, I started to get a feeling that I wouldn't like her stay at the company. I also knew that it would be almost impossible to persuade her to quit working there if my fears ever became reality. Though I had my takebacks, I was really happy for her. She finally got to work a job she wanted and had dreamt of. I hated the way she was miserable during the year she worked as a teacher, and I was happy she had gotten something that made her happy to wake up each passing day. The weeks passed, with her getting more enthusiastic about her work life with each passing day. I won't lie, I started to get a little jealous. Not a lot of people were still giggy about working for more than 2 months. There's always the initial, "I love working here" stage, but I didn't always last that long. Mine sure didn't. Her joy about work was nice, meant we got to get freaky in the other room often, which was wild. She never had any complaints about her work, except for a few customers being customers, which was something I was happy was going right for her. Now the other thing I didn't like about where she worked started to rear its head. Most of the workers were career-driven feminists who were all single past the age of 35. I felt that at the age of 23, she was way too young and could potentially be malleable or brainwashed into thinking that she made a mistake marrying early. Also, I hoped that she didn't start to model their single lifestyle, because she looked up to a lot of them. Now the funny thing is, the conversations she had with them, at least the ones I knew of, mostly centered around their careers. They also had conversations about other things though, but they mostly spoke about how they wanted to grow their business to the highest of heights. She told me a lot of things about them, how her boss, a 49-year-old woman as of then, always told her next step was this, or that other one, which were all always something about making more money and becoming the most popular or influential person that bore her name. I don't remember the name, but my ex-wife always said the name with so much respect then. Well, slowly they started to tell her things and she started to listen. She started to want to be like these women. She wanted to become an influential person herself. I tried to talk to her, to tell her that I loved her ambition, but those women weren't women she should aspire to be like. I tried to talk to her, show her more influential women, who were able to make names for themselves while still being in a committed relationship. Funny enough, they always talked her up for being the youngest, but still the only one who was married. There were days when she would come back more excited than normal, because a coworker, one of whom she looked up to, had told her she'd happily swap lives with her. So it seemed they all wanted to get married someday, but one thing that most of the women didn't want was, you guessed, kids. She had started dropping subtle hints that she didn't want kids now. I knew it was because of her work environment. The only people who had kids were the people who did the maintenance, IT and other stuff. The women who worked with the main team, which she was a part of, didn't. At this point, we were drawing closer to the time we gave before we started to try for kids. I paid no mind to whatever hints and signs she dropped and decided that she'd either tell me herself or we move on as planned. After our 5th anniversary, we talked about her going off birth control. She disagreed. I laughed, to be honest, but I didn't find anything funny about her disagreement. She told me a lot of things that her group of undesirables had said to her about having kids, how the only thing the man had to worry about was the initial, which the men liked. Every other thing was on the women. She talked on and on about how she felt bringing a child into the world was only going to slow her pace. At this point, she had already started climbing up the corporate ladder. It was disheartening to see the woman I loved, who was always a mom, who always loved nurturing, who wanted to have kids before we even got married, turn into something like this, something I couldn't explain in just 3 years of working at that place. The bunch of undesirables, as I started calling her coworkers, had indoctrinated her with their undesirable ideas. They had turned my woman into your average deluded feminist. What was worse? She cited the fact that she was the one who earned the bulk of the money we spent and the money we had in our joint account. Low blow that was, if you ask me. We talked about this for several months. She had started telling me the things her mates at the office were telling her, that I was unknowingly becoming a part of the problem, that I couldn't see past my patriarchal instincts which were meant to oppress women. There's no way she thought me wanting kids was oppression, was what I thought. Unknown to me, this woman was already far gone. This conversation went on for a longer period of time than I expected. It took her a few months, but on my birthday, November the 27th, 12 years ago, she brought her birthday gift to me. She had gone off birth control. I was happy, really happy. It was now time for me to make little McLean babies. Unknown to me, that was where the evil deeds started. We tried for 2 years for a baby. At this point, if I was given just one child, I'd have bitten the hand off of whoever offered it. We went to different family clinics, met with different fertility experts, and did tests on each other. Deep down, I thought I was being punished for being an absolute player in 7 years from 17 till 24 when I first met Caroline. I had gone to see a neurologist, just to be sure I was even able to get a woman pregnant. She went to see the people she would see to get a fertility test done, or at least that was what she told me. When we got results, we were both really fertile, and the specialists only said we should try more so that it would surely happen. Hey, more sex. I'll take what I can get. Over the next 2 years, we still got no results. Then unfortunately, and also fortunately for me, she got involved in an accident, a fatal accident that claimed the lives of several of her coworkers as they went on a convention in another state. I was chilling at home that day. 'Twas a Saturday evening, so I was back home from working. She wasn't home, so everywhere was extremely quiet. I was sitting in the living room doing nothing at all, just sitting. You men know how soul-pleasing a quiet house is. I got a call from a hospital in the state where she was. She was involved in an accident and was one of the few who they got to on time and were saved. I was told she was put on life support but needed to be operated on before the next 3 days, or she might not make it. I rushed down to the hospital with every possible thing that I thought would be needed. It took me till 10 a.m. the next day to get there, but I didn't stop driving until I got to the hospital, driving for more than 12 hours straight. Immediately I got there, I rushed to the where I met my ex-wife. Seeing her in that state, it was pretty hard to contain myself. The thoughts of losing her taunted me. I was scared. I handed whatever documents the hospital needed and they started the surgery. 2 days later she was stable, she could talk and all. I stayed by her side at the hospital all through the days. We were talking and laughing when the doctor came in to check on her, as he did at least once a day. As he made to leave, I asked when she'd be discharged. He responded saying, "Very soon, I just need to prescribe some medication and checkups at the hospital where you live, but before that I'd need to know if there's anything that could affect the medication I'd be prescribing. We don't want to accidentally cripple or even worse, do in a patient we just spent 12 hours in the operating room with." "Anything like what?" Caroline asked. "You know, things like ulcer, pregnancy, diabetes, and aborted pregnancies. Anything that may have not been in the medical history." "No," I responded. "There are no health obstructions." The doctor said okay and headed out of the room. He didn't make it out the door when my ex-wife called him back. "Wait," she said. "There is something." The doctor turned and walked back towards us, asking to hear what it was. She looked at me. I could see in her face that she was afraid to say whatever it was she wanted to say. She hesitated a little, then I nudged her to say what it was. I had an abortion last week. Hold on a minute, what? I didn't even know when I had shouted this out. Please don't stream the patient, you don't want to risk us having a setback. I controlled myself. The doctor took notes and left. It was now my turn to ask the questions. What do you mean you had an abortion? You had an abortion when we were desperately trying to have kids for 2 years? What made you make such a decision without talking to me first? She started crying, saying she never wanted me to find out this way. That wasn't what I asked her. I told her to answer only the questions I asked, nothing more. She started to talk about the years she spent at the company. She talked about the fact that the women she walked with were all against having children, how they didn't want anyone to be dependent on them. She told me how they called children leeches, parasites. She told me how she had told them about our fights, and how one of them suggested she agree with me but get abortions behind my back. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. She said the lady told her that she might only have to do it once and that I might give up after trying for 6 months to a year. I was really disappointed at her. Are these really the people she looked up to? How many? I asked her. She shook her head, saying she didn't want to answer, that I'd leave her if she said how many. I looked at this lady, at this murderer. I asked again, how many? She shook her head, saying, no, 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 no. How many? 7. She said, finally caving. Wow, 7. 7 abortions. All the while she watched me blame myself for us not being able to have kids, and all the while we could have had maybe 2 kids running around the crib. Wow. I walked out of the hospital. As I headed home, I thought about the whole thing. It took me 17 hours to get back home, as I used that time to think about the whole thing. I imagined having 7 children running around my house. I closed all my windows and screamed for a long time, hoping I'd scream away the pain. After successfully giving myself a headache, I calmed down. I decided I needed to get back at her. The only reasonable thing that came to mind was to ruin the career she willingly killed my kids to have. I remembered her telling me once about how the company was evading tax the whole time they existed. She had briefed me on how they did it, and because she was now CFM, Chief Financial Manager, she was actively involved in it all. I knew what I had to do. When I got home, I went straight for her keys and headed to her office. Since the majority of the undesirables were a part of the accident and those who weren't were at the convention, I took my chance. I went for all the files I could find that could serve as tangible proof of their tax evasion, like records of monthly profits, budgets, anything I came across that seemed like evidence, I took. I scanned copies and saved them on my device. Then I called my lawyer, told him how things were. I evenly shared the money in the joint account and I left the house to her. I didn't even know what to do there anymore. Everything in there reminded me of her. By the end of the week, it was all ready. The IRS had been alerted and proof presented to them. The divorce papers were ready. I went out to meet my realtor, to find a better place to move into. The time I had spent there was already too much. By the time I had gotten home, Caroline was back from the hospital. She got up and rushed to me when she saw me. I put my hand out at a stop sign. I don't want to hear whatever it is you have to say. The papers on the table are divorce papers. You've been served. Henceforth, we will only be conversing via our lawyers, I said to her. She tried to beg me, tried to explain herself, but I wasn't having it. I went straight to the room, reached for my bag of clean clothes, and headed right out. I only stopped at the door to say these last words to her. Listen, love, you should be ashamed of yourself. You broke my trust and went against nature, all because of your stupid career. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I've alerted the IRS, so I hope your company has made a ton of profit, because you better call Saul. I hope you regret the decision you made, and I hope that whenever you look in the mirror you see yourself for who you really are. A murderer. I left again. This time for good. I slept at my office for a week before I was able to find a new place that was within my price range and mortgage plan. In 2 months our divorce was final. Just a day after we were officially divorced, I heard on the local news radio about an all-female company being busted for tax evasion. Yes. Giving karma time to do its job. Do it yourself. I didn't really follow the court proceedings. Hell, I was there only twice, the day I was called on as a witness and the day of the sentencing. The case took 2 years. I dressed in a 2-piece suit, like the meme, dressed for my enemy's downfall. I wanted her to know that I did this to her, and I was there to watch her hopes and dreams burn before her eyes. They took everything from here, even down to the house I left her. The company was shut down completely as they couldn't afford to recount all those years of unpaid taxes, and she, as the manager of finance, and her boss, the COO, were both sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. As she was escorted out of the court, our eyes met and I had my best evil smile on as I then flipped her off. She bowed her head and I saw a drop of tear fall from her eyes. Look who had the last laugh. Me. I got a call later on, 4 years ago, from an unknown number. It was her. She said she had got out close to 4 months ago and that she wanted to make amends. We met at a KFC on a Saturday evening and talked about everything. She talked about how, when she first started working with the company, she had never seen so many made women in one gathering, how she always thought before then that her biggest achievement was being Mrs. McLean, and how she wanted to be more than just a wife. She said she started seeing a common denominator amongst the women, which was that they were all never married, nor did they have kids. She said she thought in order to make it she had to be like them, and that since she was already married the only other thing was to not have children. She saw how they openly condemned having kids and how they said their lives were much better because they didn't have any parasites latching onto them. She said she hated herself for being so naive and impressionable. She didn't have to say it, it was evident in her appearance, posture, and her body. I had noticed some scars and her hands, although she tried to hide them by wearing long sleeves. She said when she got out, she went over to a friend from the office, that what she was when she got there made her hate herself even more. She said the lady was now married with 2 kids aged 4 and 1, and she also had another on the way. She told me that when they had started talking, she had told her how she only remained working there because the pay was good and the benefits even better. The friend of hers told Caroline that she was already engaged to be married and had planned to resign as soon as she got married, until the company was shut down, that is. Caroline went on to talk about what she said was the most painful part of it all. When she asked about the lady who gave her the abortion advice, the lady told her that after the company got shut down by the government she left the country. She said that they had still kept in touch until the lady told her that she was pregnant, aged 41. Caroline told me that her friend from work got angry at the lady who had given the abortion advice, stating that she had given someone advice that helped ruin her marriage only for her to decide she was going to have children, the same children she strongly advised against. She showed me a recording of the words of the lady who gave her the advice. I played it and it went like so, not word for word because it's been a long time, but this was basically what the lady in the recording said. I was really envious of Carl. She was the youngest and still somehow was the one who had life figured out the most. It was a good thing she was such a naive lady. Most of us were miserable. Yes, we were rich, but what good is having all the money in this world if you had no one to share it with? I gave her that advice in hopes that her husband would find out. Not only was she married, but she was married to a literal knight in shining armor. I laughed. To be honest, these were the women she wanted to be like, sad, pathetic, and miserable women. These were the women she betrayed me. I looked at her, she was now like those women, although now she wasn't as rich as they were, she didn't even have anything. I laughed because of how sad it was. She asked about me, how my life was, if I had remarried. I told her that I wasn't. Her eyes lit up for the first time that day. She probably thought we still had a chance. I shut that hope down quickly. Told her I was finally happy, that I had finally moved on. I told her I wished her the best in all her endeavors. I really did. I thought she had suffered enough already. She tried to plead with me to remain in contact, to be friends, so we can see where that led. She told me she still loved me. She said she couldn't stop thinking about what I told her that day I left the house. She had started crying at this point. To be fair, she cried a lot during the conversation. I told her to forget about us rekindling what we had, that was never going to happen, that I don't see the woman I loved anymore, and that I had moved on in the time she had spent in jail. I told her I could help her back on her feet. Moving on was hard. Sometimes when I sleep, I dream about those 7 kids, a dream where they had names, a life, and a future. I have 1 child now, adopted. I'm serious about never getting married again. He's a real gem. God gave me the opportunity to choose a child this time and I chose right. His 10th birthday was just yesterday and he was the reason why I decided to tell the world my story. Thank you guys for reading this. I love the life I've built for myself since I left her. I'm happy now, my son makes me happy.